Armored columns carved through the grey morning light outside Pokrovsk, engines roaring like a declaration. Steel tracks chewed into frozen earth. Exhaust smoke curled upward in thick black ribbons. From drone cameras high above, the formation looked unstoppable, a mechanized tide rolling forward with cold, mechanical certainty. On telegram channels and state broadcasts, the message was already written. Inevitable. Strategic breakthrough. Another city about to fall. Clips looped of tanks crossing open fields, infantry riding confidently atop armored hulls, commanders speaking of momentum as if it were destiny. Commentators framed it as ownership reclaimed. They spoke not of battle, but of arrival. They moved like men who believed the map had already changed. And for a moment, just a moment, it seemed like they were right. The outskirts of Pokrovsk were eerily still. No visible resistance. No artillery thunder. No columns of smoke rising from defensive strikes. Just empty roads. Silent buildings. A town holding its breath beneath a pale Ukrainian sky. Inside that silence, however, something else was unfolding. Beneath tree lines and behind reinforced earthworks, Ukrainian defenders watched through scopes and drone feeds. Coordinates were whispered, not shouted. Fingers rested steady on triggers. Anti-armor teams lay concealed in patient rows. Artillery units waited for a signal that had already been rehearsed a dozen times in the dark. Civilians had been evacuated quietly. Supply lines were hidden carefully. Routes were mapped with deliberate precision. There was no chaos here. No chest-thumping bravado. Just discipline. Because the silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The armored columns continued forward, emboldened by the absence of fire. Confidence thickened the air. They believed they were stepping into vacuum, into a city already psychologically defeated. But war has a cruel habit of punishing assumption. The drones kept recording. The engines kept roaring. The headlines kept celebrating momentum. And just beyond the tree line, unseen eyes tracked every meter of their advance. But what those columns didn't know, was that Pokrovsk wasn't waiting to fall. It was waiting to fight. Pokrovsk was never just another dot on a map. It sits in the western stretch of the Donetsk region, where rail lines crisscross like arteries and highways stitch together the eastern front. Freight routes that carry ammunition. Roads that funnel reinforcements. Junctions that decide whether an army advances, or stalls. Control Pokrovsk, and you don't just take ground, you tilt the geometry of the war itself. Military analysts had been warning about it for months. Not because it was glamorous. Not because it carried the mythic weight of a capital city. But because of what it connected. Logistics win wars. Supply lines decide who holds through winter and who runs dry by spring. If Pokrovsk falls, the front shifts. That wasn't a slogan. It was a calculation. In studio panels from Washington to Warsaw, commentators spoke in measured tones about operational corridors and momentum. On social media, armchair strategists circled the town in red digital ink, predicting domino effects. Some argued that a breakthrough here could fracture defensive depth across the eastern theater. Others warned that losing it would hand the Kremlin a narrative victory as powerful as any territorial gain. Because this war, the grinding, brutal conflict between Russia and Ukraine, is fought not only with artillery and drones, but with perception. With headlines, with the psychology of inevitability. A captured Pokrovsk would send a message, that resistance is shrinking, that defense is thinning, that time favors the aggressor. It would ripple outward, into diplomatic halls, into funding debates, into the morale of soldiers dug into trenches miles away. And that is why the columns rolled forward with such confidence. Not just for asphalt and rail steel, but for symbolism. For the chance to redraw the map and declare momentum irreversible. The stakes were not local. They were historic. If Pokrovsk falls, the front shifts. And that's exactly why Moscow believed it could not afford to fail. They did not creep forward. They advanced in broad daylight. Armored vehicles fanned out across open terrain in deliberate formation, as if visibility itself were part of the strategy. Drones hovered high enough to be seen. Flags were fixed upright, not tucked away. This was not a quiet maneuver. It was a statement. Momentum had become the word of the week. Pro-Kremlin correspondents embedded with the advancing units spoke of unstoppable pressure and strategic inevitability. Clips circulated showing columns stretching toward the horizon, engines synchronized like a machine too large to fail. The narrative wrote itself. Defenses were thinning, resistance was exhausted, and Pokrovsk would be next in a line of hard-fought gains. On television panels, Confident analysts traced arrows across digital maps, predicting a rapid takeover. Days, not weeks, one insisted. The argument wasn't just about territory. It was about psychology. Capture the city quickly, they claimed, and the rest of the eastern line would begin to wobble. The footage was powerful by design. Tanks cresting ridgelines, infantry waving casually at cameras, commanders speaking in calm, assured tones about timetable and control. It wasn't just documentation, it was psychological warfare, a projection of inevitability meant to seep into Ukrainian morale and Western resolve alike. The message was simple: this is what victory looks like. And above it all hovered the larger image carefully cultivated under Vladimir Putin: decisive leadership, forward motion, a state that bends reality through willpower alone. Each kilometer gained fed that image. Each confident broadcast reinforced it. But maps do not reveal everything. Speed compresses distance, yes. It also stretches supply lines. The longer the column, the thinner the support. The faster the push, the greater the blind spots. Fields that look empty can hide precision. Silence can conceal calculation. Yet the advance continued, bold and visible. They were moving fast, too fast. Because in war, confidence can be contagious, and so can illusion. And the deeper they pressed toward Pokrovsk, the more that illusion began to outpace awareness. But speed without awareness can turn confidence into catastrophe. Long before the engines were heard at dawn, the work had already been done. While armored columns rehearsed victory in public, Ukrainian planners were studying contour lines in private. Pokrovsk was not defended as a single point on a map. It was defended as a system, layered, patient, deliberate. Defensive depth meant that no single breach would decide the outcome. Every field, every tree line, every stretch of road became part of a wider equation. The terrain itself was an ally. Open approaches funneled vehicles into predictable corridors. Subtle elevations offered clear sight lines to those who knew where to look. Rural edges and industrial outskirts formed natural choke points. What appeared from above as empty farmland had been quietly measured for distance, angle, and timing. Anti-armor teams memorized landmarks the way musicians memorize notes. Artillery crews rehearsed coordinates until numbers felt instinctive. Intelligence flowed constantly. Drone surveillance mapped movement patterns days in advance. Thermal imaging tracked engine heat through the night. Signals were intercepted, analyzed, logged. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, just accumulation. Information layered upon information until the picture sharpened. The defenders did not need to guess where the columns would move. They could see the routes forming in real time. Camouflage became an art form. Netting blended with winter brush. Positions were dug not just for protection, but for invisibility. Anti-armor corridors were constructed with precision. Narrow lanes where advancing vehicles would feel safe enough to proceed, unaware they were entering geometry designed against them. Mines were placed not randomly, but strategically, shaping momentum rather than merely disrupting it. And while soldiers prepared, civilians were moved. Quietly, methodically, buses before dawn, family by family, no viral footage, no dramatic speeches, just responsibility carried out under the assumption that battle would come. Schools emptied, windows were boarded, shelters were stocked. The absence of panic was not ignorance. It was trust, trust that preparation mattered more than performance. The contrast could not have been sharper. One side projected dominance with noise and spectacle. The other constructed resilience with silence and discipline. One relied on momentum, the other relied on mathematics. Coordination extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Western-supplied systems were integrated carefully into the defensive web, not as silver bullets, but as force multipliers. Training cycles had refined timing. Communications were hardened. Support from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization provided strategic depth, reinforcing that this defense was not isolated but interconnected. Still, none of that guaranteed victory. Preparation does not eliminate risk. It only narrows it. Inside bunkers and command posts, there were no declarations of inevitability. Only checklists, only quiet confirmations, ammunition counts, weather assessments, final drone sweeps. Every unit understood its role, not as heroes seeking glory, but as guardians holding a line that mattered beyond a single town. The engines grew louder. Dust began to rise on the horizon. On monitors, armored silhouettes crept closer to pre-marked grids. The geometry was aligning. The corridors were filling exactly as anticipated. Timing windows narrowed to seconds. No one cheered. They waited. Because discipline is not dramatic until the moment it is unleashed. And when the first armored column crossed the outer threshold, everything changed. The first explosion did not echo. It cracked. A sharp, violent rupture tore through the lead vehicle at the edge of the corridor, lifting steel into the air like a toy flung by an unseen hand. For a split second, the advancing column hesitated, not yet understanding what had happened. Then the second strike hit. Fire bloomed. Smoke swallowed the road. From concealed positions along the tree line, anti-armor teams fired in disciplined sequence. No shouting, no chaos on their end. Just calculated release. Each missile tracked, adjusted, and found its mark with mechanical certainty. The armored spear that had rolled forward so confidently now splintered under invisible pressure. Above them, drones circled like patient hawks. Operators fed coordinates to artillery units positioned miles away. Seconds later, the sky answered. Precision shells descended into pre-mapped grids, landing not randomly but surgically, cutting off retreat routes, boxing in vehicles that suddenly had nowhere to go. The earth convulsed under impact. Metal screamed. Radios crackled with overlapping commands that dissolved into static. Inside the column, confusion spread faster than flame. Drivers attempted to maneuver around burning wreckage, only to discover the flanks were no safer than the road ahead. Vehicles veered into fields that concealed mines. One tank stalled, another reversed directly into debris. Formation dissolved into instinct. The tight, confident line became a cluster of isolated machines fighting for space, for visibility, for survival. Smoke thickened until the landscape blurred. Through thermal scopes, Ukrainian defenders watched silhouettes scramble. Targets that had once appeared as a unified front now flickered as scattered heat signatures. Drone feeds captured the unraveling in real time, commanders trying to re-establish control, infantry dismounting into terrain already measured against them. The kill zones had been waiting. Every meter of that corridor had been calculated for this moment. Crossfire angles overlapped. Artillery adjusted with chilling calm. Anti-armor units rotated positions to avoid detection. The defenders did not chase. They contained. What had looked like empty farmland transformed into a labyrinth of consequence. Explosions overlapped with shouted orders. Tracks spun uselessly in churned soil. Ammunition inside disabled vehicles ignited in secondary blasts that shook the ground again and again. The roar of engines gave way to the staccato rhythm of impacts and the hiss of burning fuel. Momentum evaporated. In its place stood shock, raw, disorienting shock. The advance that had seemed inevitable only minutes earlier now struggled to orient itself within a battlefield it did not fully understand. Visibility was compromised. Communications faltered. Assumptions shattered. From above, the drone footage told a different story than the morning broadcasts. The tide had not rolled through Pokrovsk. It had collided with it. And as the smoke thickened and the formation fractured beyond recognition, one truth became undeniable: this was no accidental skirmish. This was design. And that was only the opening move. The battlefield did not erupt all at once. It constricted. What looked like chaos from inside the smoke was, from above, a tightening pattern. The first strikes had not been meant to destroy everything. They had been meant to shape movement. To herd steel into geometry already drawn. Layer 1 had stalled the advance. Layer 2 now began to close. Artillery did not fire in wild barrages. It rotated. One battery thundered, then fell silent as another picked up the rhythm from a different angle. The effect was disorienting. Explosions landing in sequence, shifting just enough to deny safe passage. Any attempt to regroup was met with recalibrated precision. Any effort to push forward triggered fire from the flank. The road into Pokrovsk had become a funnel. And funnels work both ways. Vehicles that tried to reverse discovered the corridor behind them was no longer clear. Craters fractured escape routes. Damaged armor blocked maneuverability. Drones adjusted altitude, feeding coordinates in relentless loops. The defenders were not improvising. They were executing. Encirclement was no longer a theoretical risk. It was a tightening possibility. Units that had advanced with confidence now found themselves compressed between overlapping arcs of fire. Communications faltered under electronic interference. Signals that once carried clear commands dissolved into distortion. GPS flickered. Drone feeds cut out unexpectedly. The invisible layer of the battlefield, the digital one, had turned hostile. Momentum, once the greatest asset, became their liability. The longer the column stretched, the more exposed it was. Supply trucks lagged behind, separated from armored protection. Ammunition vehicles became targets. What had been designed as a show of strength now resembled overextension, a machine too large to pivot quickly, too committed to reverse easily. Inside command vehicles, the psychological shift was unmistakable. Minutes earlier, the conversation had centered on timetable and occupation. Now it revolved around extraction and containment. The vocabulary of dominance gave way to the language of survival. Officers barked orders not to advance, but to stabilize, to hold, to find cover in a landscape deliberately stripped of it. The tempo changed. At first, the Russian advance had dictated rhythm, engines roaring, tracks grinding forward in synchronized waves. Now the rhythm belonged to the defenders. Fire came in calculated pulses. Silence fell just long enough to lure repositioning. Then another strike landed, precisely where movement had resumed. The inevitability broadcast that morning began to unravel in real time. Drone footage that once captured triumphant movement now showed stalled armor clustered awkwardly, smoke columns marking vulnerability instead of progress. Infantry scrambled not toward objectives,